Tell me when you're ready. Okay, this is a video of how to convert an ORC from a Campy to a Shimano or vice versa. This particular one, I've got a Campy hub here, and we're going to convert it from a Campy cassette body to a Shimano cassette body. I've got all the tools and everything laid out that I'm going to need to perform this job. It's really quite a simple job. So first thing we're going to need to do is remove the axle. That requires two 5mm Allen wrenches. This is the fixed end, this is the adjustable end. Now the adjustable end, when this is assembled, it is assembled with Loctite on the threads. So it may be very tight and difficult to remove at first. But once you get it going, it should break free pretty easily. And so just remove one axle end cap like this. Till it comes off. And set that aside. Make sure that you don't confuse it, because this is one of the things that we're going to need to change. The Campy axle cap is shorter than the Shimano axle cap. The next step that you're going to need to do is remove the axle. This is usually very simple. You can just press on the end of the axle here until you get enough to grab on and pull it out. If the axle is tough, it's hard to get out, you can press it as far as you can and then use this piece here if necessary to push it through. But usually that's not necessary. Usually it'll come out by hand. So you've got the axle removed now. And so now we have the hub with the cassette body and no axle. So now we're going to remove the cassette body here. Alright, the first step for removing the cassette body is to take what I call the cassette body setting tool. Now this will slide through as if it's an axle, so you can just slide it straight through like that, and then you push it up with an end, and you're going to need to close it off with a lock ring here. This will fit over there and thread into a lock ring. It literally is a lock ring, so that's will thread easily into the threads there. You don't need to make it tight, just spin it on by hand until it stops. Alright, now you're going to need one of the press handles here. Now if you don't have one of these, it doesn't matter, because a shaft with two nuts will do the same thing. But I'm going to do this with the actual handles. But a 3/8 shaft with two nuts on each end will actually do the same thing. So once we've got this here, then slide this through the entire assembly here. Now this piece here is the cassette body removal cup. And this piece here we'll actually use now, and we'll use it again to set the cassette body and the bearing in place. These pieces fit together like that. So it goes over like that. Obviously there's two sides to this. This is the side this goes in. This is the side the cassette body actually will press into when we take it off. So that goes on here like that. You'll see that will just go straight up against the hub shell. And then put your threaded handle on the other side, or in the case of just using a shaft and nut on the other side and a wrench, and simply squeeze this together, and what's happening is it's pushing the cassette body, the bearing, out of the hub shell by doing that. So now we'll simply remove these pieces here, and you can see when I take this off, it exposes the external bearing. The cassette body is pushed out of the hub shell safely and easily. So you can take that out there, the hub shell out there. Now we need to remove the setting tube here, and again just spin this off. That's why you don't want to tighten this, because you don't need it tight, and you want to be able to just take it off easily by hand. And take this out here. So now we have the cassette body is separate from the hub shell. So now we're going to put in the new cassette body. Use the same basic tools. I'll show you. Alright, so over here we have the new parts that we're actually going to put in. Now, if necessary, you can clean and lubricate the driver gear in here. This is where the pawls engage the driver mechanism there. If necessary, you can clean and lubricate that. And that, if you lubricate it, you just want to lubricate it with a good quality waterproof grease. All right. The other thing is you want to make sure that this bearing surface area is clean and dry and free of lubrication. So this bearing surface area here you want to make sure is clean and dry. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our Shimano cassette body. You notice it's very similar to the Campy, except it's set for Shimano, and you'll also notice that when I remove this, the bearing and the bearing cover stay on the cassette body. When I install it, we actually put this into the hub first, and then we install the bearing and the bearing cover. Okay? So, it's very easy to install this. Simply bring it into the driver area, the pawl end into the driver area, bring it in an angle like that, and then rotate counterclockwise, and you'll get the second pawl in. And then it'll be sitting there like that, and the third pawl, you can see, will be sitting there, but that's really easy. Just take a small screwdriver or an awl or something, and just push that in, and that way you've got the cassette body just drops into place like that. Okay? So the next step is we're going to take our bearing, and you drop it over the cassette body there, and what we're going to do is we're going to press this bearing over the cassette body and into the hub shell. That's one of the features of this hub that makes it unique. This bearing supports the cassette body directly at the hub shell. It creates a stiffer hub, stiffer interface, and it also holds the driver mechanism completely concentric to the driver gear. Finally, this bearing serves as a really good seal because it completely closes the driver chamber, which is another nice feature, which means that this will not need to be removed and maintained routinely like other hubs, because other hubs only have a little contact seal, whereas the driver chamber in the Ork is completely sealed. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the bearing into the hub shell. For that, you need a 6903 bearing drift. That's going to fit in the other side of the hub shell over here. Now once you've got this in place, it's really simple. If you want to pick it up, hold it like this. That way you're holding the cassette body in place and it can't fall out when you're trying to do the job. And so that will go in like that. That's your 6903 bearing drift. And then we're going to put this over our shaft like that. And again, if you don't have a press, just a shaft with a nut in it will work. And then this piece here, you can see this fits over the cassette body, and this surface here makes contact with both races of the external bearing simultaneously. So when you press it in, you're not loading the bearing in any way. So if you use this tool, you cannot damage the bearing in any way pressing it into the hub shell. That goes over there, and again, put the adjustable handle on one side. And I like to bring it in just a tiny bit until the bearing starts to get in place. And then I use a little bit of sleeve retaining compound. It's not strictly necessary, but it's nice to lock that bearing in place. And so what I'll do is once I've got it here with the bearing still exposed, I'll just take sleeve retaining compound. I use Loctite number 603. And I'll draw a very light bead around the outer edge of the bearing here. You don't need very much. Just draw a little light bead all the way around the edge here. All the way around the edge, like that. And then we just press this in place like that. And what's happening now is it's pressing the bearing safely over the cassette body and into the bearing bore, and it'll press all the way up to the bearing stop inside the hub shell itself. You don't need to get it super tight, but make sure that you snug it up when you're done to make sure that the bearing is pressed all the way to the stop. Then we'll take this off here. And take that off there. And I always like to, if you use Loctite, it's a good idea to clean that off because it will set and get sticky. And also I like to go in here and just take a little rag and just press it in there and just get out any excess Loctite that may have squirted out. And you'll see that there's a little bit of green on there from the Loctite. You can take that out. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, we've set the bearing up to the shoulder in the hub shell. Now we need to set the cassette body so that the bearing shoulder of the cassette body is set properly on the edge on the race of the bearing itself. So the next step is we use this tool again, the setting tool. This will go in. Now, because we're going to a Shimano cassette body, we need to use a Shimano lock ring. Before, of course, we use the Campy lock ring to remove the Campy. But same thing, this just fits over here. And again, just thread that in. Just thread it in hand tight until it stops. Alright, now this piece again fits over here. We don't need the drift this time because we're actually setting on the tube itself. So drop the drift off the press, put that through there, put this piece on the other side here, bring it up until it stops, and you'll turn this, and it'll only turn a tiny bit. What's happening is it's actually pushing the cassette body slightly outward, so the bearing stop on the inner race of the cassette body makes contact with the back side of the bearing in the hub shell. So that is, as you saw, a very small amount that you actually need to turn that, and you can feel it start and stop quite easily. So we've got that there now, and the next step is to install the dust cover, this piece right here. Now, I like to put a little of very light grease in this chamber because it helps to create an additional seal. It's not strictly necessary, but it is nice. So the only grease I've found that actually works for this is a grease called Slick Honey or Slick Oleum. It's the same stuff, it just has two different names. So I just draw a bead inside that chamber there. And so when I press that dust cover on here, we're going to have a really, really effectively sealed drive chamber. Because if you can see that bearing there, in order for anything to get into the drive chamber, it has to go through both sides of that outer bearing. It'll also have to go through this grease bath, and then both sides of the bearing. And for it to be contaminated from this side, it has to go through both seals of both hub shell bearings. So it's truly a sealed driver mechanism, unlike conventional hubs where there's just a little contact seal, and those actually do need routine maintenance, whereas this driver mechanism will not.